Hello, my name's James from plumberparts.co.uk and we're working with Dyno today to give you a few bits of information about the things you should do to your radiators to prevent there being any problems. We'll cover putting inhibitor in your heating system, how to cure little leaks on lock shield valves, and also the benefits of installing inline magnetic filters. Remember, if you're not happy with doing any of the preventative measures that we outlined in this video, then you should get a qualified professional like a dyno engineer to come in and do it for you. Anyway, let's see what we can do, and I hope you enjoy the video. The first thing I'd do to prevent there being problems with your radiators is to add inhibitor to the heating system water. What inhibitor does is prevents the water from reacting with the internal components of the radiator and also the boiler, and when water and metal mix together without inhibitor, they create rust, which in turn creates sludge, which stops the heating system from working properly. Often you'll find cold patches of the radiator where the sludge forms, and inhibitor prevents all that from happening. It's easy to add to your heating system. All you need to do is shut the valves at each end of your radiator and then use a radiator bleed key to dissipate the pressure at the top. Pop a tub under the radiator and slacken off the nut on the radiator side of the valve. Let all the water out of the radiator and then tighten that nut back up. Once you've done that, you can go back to the top of the radiator and completely remove the whole of the air bleed key. And then you can use a funnel or a flexible hose to pour your inhibitor into the top of the radiator. Pop the bleed key back in and close, then you can open up the valves on the radiator again and then vent the radiator as normal, and then make sure that the system pressures and the system's filled up okay. And there you go, you've inhibited your heating system and prevented it from having any problems with corrosion. Of course, another great way to make sure that you don't have problems with sludge and system debris is to install an inline magnetic filter. Now these are usually installed on the return pipe to the boiler because it's very important that the boiler internals are protected from any debris coming in. If there is any rust caused by a lack of inhibitor, or there is any kind of debris in the system, an inline magnetic filter will remove that from the heating system, and then every so often when the heating system is serviced, be flushed out by your servicing engineer. So now we're going to look at the valves that are actually on the radiator. You've got the thermostatic radiator type valve at this end, and you've got at this end here the lock shield valve. And what we're going to do first is have a quick look at this. What the lock shield valve does is regulates flow of hot water into the radiator regardless of what the thermostatic radiator valve is doing. Now they're very handy for balancing the heating system out, and we're going to cover that in a minute. As a plumber myself, I'm often called out to radiator lock shields leaking, and they're very easy to fix yourself. All you need to do often is there's a small gland at the top of the radiator that has a little leak on it, and often all that needs is just a slight nip up, 1/10 to 1/8 of a whole turn. It's just that much to stop them leaking. If they're leaking on one of the nuts on each side, usually what you do is get a pair of grips like so, grab the body of the radiator valve, and then you can tighten the nut up using a set of adjustables. If it's a decorative lock shield valve, then I'd often recommend that you get a small piece of cloth around the valve and then grab that with the grips so as not to score the body of the valve itself. The next valve on a radiator, and really common in most houses in the UK, is the thermostatic radiator valve, or TRV. Thermostatic radiator valves work by sensing the temperature in the room, not in the radiator, and then regulate the amount of hot water coming into that radiator to attain the temperature you've set on the thermostatic radiator valve. Now as a plumber, I often find that people don't use thermostatic radiator valves in the right way. They'll often go into a room, feel that the room is cold, they'll feel the radiator and the radiator will be burning hot, which means that the thermostatic radiator valve knows that the room is cold and is trying to heat it up. But they'll still then turn it up from whatever setting it was on to the maximum setting, which means the radiator will not cool off and level out as the room comes up to a nice normal temperature, and therefore the person doesn't save any money on their heating. Another problem with thermostatic radiator valves is that after a long summer of being closed, they get stuck in the shut position, and it's very easy for you to actually get them working again. What you need to do is remove the thermostatic radiator valve head, and then get yourself a pair of grips, and you'll see a pin underneath the head that you've just removed. Use your grips to work that pin free, and once it's moving up and down nice and freely, use a spray lubricant to make sure that it doesn't get stuck again. And then all you need to do is pop your TRV head back on, tighten it up, and set it to the temperature you had it on before. The final thing we're going to look at, and often the main reason that the heating system is not working properly, is because it is unbalanced. Balancing the heating system evenly distributes flow from the boiler and from the central heating pump around all of the radiators rather than just preferring a few radiators. It's very easy to do, and I'd recommend you do it to all of the radiators in the house. Sometimes it can take a few days to get it all balanced out and working just right. So all you need to do is go to the lock shield at the end of each radiator, pull the cover off, and then using an adjustable spanner or a set of grips, completely close the lock shield valve. Remember, most lock shield valves close by being turned clockwise. Then all you should need to do is give it a quarter turn to a half a turn open. And usually what I do to make sure I'm doing that right is use a felt tip pen to mark the shaft of the valve and the body of the valve so I know how much I've turned it. Do that to every radiator in the house and then turn your heating system on. Run it for an hour or two, and if you find that all the radiators are working, then great, you've successfully balanced your heating system. If you find that one or two aren't getting as hot as you liked, don't get the lock shield valve and open it fully open. Just give it another quarter of a turn crack, because that could result in some of the flow being pinched by that radiator and the unbalancing of the system. And there you go, that's how you balance a heating system and distribute heat evenly around the whole of the heating system radiators. So there we go, we've gone through a few of the preventative measures you can take on your heating system to make sure that there's no problems with your radiators. Remember, if you're not happy with doing any of the preventative measures that we outlined in this video, then it's best you get a professional in, like a dyno engineer, to do it for you. Anyway, I hope you've enjoyed this video and it's helped you out, and thanks ever so much for watching. Bye bye.